Hi, my name is Dr. Jennifer Teves. I am a practicing researcher and I lead a team of talented researchers doing product experience design for a major US retailer. And I'm also an adjunct faculty for user experience design, teaching research graduate classes at Kent State University. I'm not saying that I don't think we are 100% really neglecting them. It's more on um, having a good understanding of what their needs are and what their current limitations are. So it's not to say that all companies are lacking in their understanding of the older adults or older members of our society, but some organizations might have less of an understanding than the others. So this idea would be included in like the principles of inclusive design. So what do we exactly mean by including everybody? So inclusive design means literally you're not excluding anybody in the population. So that would include people with disabilities, older adults. Um, in the United States, if you're designing only for English speaking population, are you excluding those who are non-English speakers? So in Philippines, you have members of the population that might have other special needs that you're not paying attention to. So the older adults, that specific group, would be one of those that we might not have considered sufficiently before, especially when talking about technology. Now, it depends on the type of technology that I guess we're talking about. One of the things that we have to consider is that it also depends on the range. There's the baby boomers. There's a terminology in the US that would be 60 to 75 years old, and then 75 and above would be the mature age group. Now, the 60 to 75 years old group, if you think about it, when the first iPhones came out about 15 or so years ago, the 60-year-olds were only 45. So they're not necessarily that old anymore, when these new types of technology came about. So those are the things that we also need to realize, right? So when we're thinking about older adults, we have to look at it on when they were born, what were the technologies that they were using, and how are we designing those technologies right now so they're not having a hard time adapting to it. It's potentially due to lack of understanding or appreciation of the market that older adults are, right? So the reasons why companies would neglect a certain population is because is this subgroup, is this segment worth it? Are they going to bring us the revenues that we want to bring into the company? And one of the things that companies who do not pay attention to older adults are probably, they don't realize that this specific group would be a good segment of the market that they really need to cater to. So one aspect for that is they might not have a good enough research team who would allow them to acknowledge that there are these different segments that they need to look into. In some cases, what is the priority that leadership is setting for the companies? Maybe leadership is looking at different horizons, and maybe they don't realize the value of looking at older adults as a segment of the population. Or maybe there's just complete lack of awareness on the fact that even people who are 60 years old and above are able to use technology for specific reasons. They might not be using it similar to your age group, right? For they might not be using social media for the same reasons as Gen Z or millennials, but they use it for very different reasons, and they use it very differently. Also, when my grandfather was still alive, he would use social media because he wants to keep track on where we are, his grandchildren. He's not necessarily there to post everything, but he's viewer of the things that his grandchildren are posting. And he would purchase the latest mobile devices because he wants to be hip and cool. He doesn't think that, and he can afford it. So that's the thing, right? Like one of the things that we, I guess we don't appreciate enough is the fact that not all, but a good number of older adults in the population are retired professionals, and to be honest, they probably have more money than those who just finished college. So that's the reality of the world, that if we don't pay attention to them because we work in technology and we think that they're older, they don't know how to use that technology. That's so wrong, because a lot of individuals who belong within this group are going to be a good market for any innovation that would be out there. I think I can answer that question by saying that ano ba? So one of the things that companies have to realize is um, whatever difficulties that the current segment or the current group of older adults now are facing are all going to be difficulties that every one of us would be facing down the road. So if we're not solving for those needs right now, or if we're not solving for those issues that our products, our technologies are currently having, we're not doing ourselves a favor. So failing to look at the needs of older adults, or even those individuals in our population with disability, right? Those who have um, uh, different abilities into, like, deterioration in their senses, in their eyesight, in their hearing, and all that. Failing to look into that is only failing to future proof the products and services that the company is designing. So take for example, if let's say if we go digital, right? So take for example any mobile app for that matter, ride sharing apps, not naming any of the companies, but we have a number of that's present in Philippines, and different companies are present in the States. But think if those companies are not considering if older adults are able to see, the texts that are on the screen. So take for example companies that are making ride sharing apps. So we have a number of ride sharing apps that are being used in all over Asia, Southeast Asia, and we have different companies that are present in the States. But the same principles. If you the passengers who might not have a ride for that day, or who might not be driving, would need to use a mobile app to call for a ride that will take them from one point to another. So if the product designers or the companies are not considering the needs of older adults, then older adults might not be able to figure out how to enter their payment, their credit card or their debit card into the app. If they have problems seeing because their eyesight has deteriorated, the companies might fail to design the sizes of the text to be readable and visible for these types of users. Then that would cause some failure for the users to be able to do that. If the user experience is so complex, and the passengers is not able to just start using or signing up for those services, then they would fail to even start using, then all the more so adopting the technology. Now, if a company is not operating on the perspective of, let's future proof and let's serve the population, let's not exclude anybody, they would be like, so what? There's hundreds and thousands or millions of people are using it. Why are we changing the designs for only older adults? But that's a huge miss, because if you think about it, which market would not be able to drive as efficiently, or which market would be needing people to drive them from point A to point B more often than the others? It would be older adults, right? Because especially when their motor function is not functioning well anymore, or if their family is not feeling safe for them to drive themselves anymore, then the safest bet for them is to use the ride sharing apps or ride sharing services. So not being able to think through those needs would definitely be a huge miss for the business. Trying to think of another example that's not necessarily app related. So maybe we can think about um, just the complexity of e-commerce websites. There's a long way to go for e-commerce websites that are present in Philippines. So I've been working on retail for the past few years, and since most of my family are still in Philippines, I still end up using e-commerce sites that are present in the country, and ordering from there, because the retailers here would not ship there as efficiently. But every single time I use it, I get confused. So my question is, if someone who has worked in retail for all these years gets confused in this experience, how can regular people figure out how to use it? How would older adults figure out how to use it? Right? Like the fact that, how do you even know when the package would arrive to the people receiving it? How do you know how to track the packages? How do you know if the item is out of stock? Sometimes you end up going to the cart before you even figure out that it's not available for the date that you intend for it to be delivered to the person that you're sending it to. So now, imagine older adults who are using the system. These are lolo and lola, or titos and titas who have money to spare, and they might be going online shopping to send presents to members of their family. Imagine if they're not able to figure out how to go shopping. That's really your market. That's, you would want them to keep on shopping. If they have really good experience on your e-commerce site, then they'll keep on doing it over and over again. That's how you build engagement. That's how you build adoption into the experiences that you're building. I would say it, in the world of, experience design, you refer to that as the end-to-end experience. So you start with how does a customer or a user hear about your product or the service that you're offering? How do they enter the experience that you have? If there are barriers in entering into your experience, then forget about even making money from them, right? So if there are barriers already when they start using the experience, like in these examples, I think that we're talking about, if they cannot even like create an account, right? So how can they even go through the purchase if it's an e-commerce site, for example, or if it's a ride sharing app? Now, when you consider end-to-end experience, there's the discovery phase, and then there's the use phase, and then there's when they're actually availing of your service, or purchasing, and the post sale, for example, or communication pieces that you would send to your customers. Now, to back to your question about, like, is it just the font? But definitely that's one of it. But think about accessibility in general. There are web accessibility guidelines. If these are tools that are used on the web, it has does it have any capability to do screen readers, right? Those are not only used by individuals who are blind, who would be needing screen readers to go through a digital experience, but that's just good practice. That's just ethical, right? That's just treating humans as humans. The other thing would be, does it follow Fitts law? So, for example, there are buttons and there are like clickable things, areas on your app or your website, for example. Just sticking with the example that we have right now. Very basic things that you would think designers and product developers already know by now, but you can still see that some targets. When I say targets, these are like clickable or something that you can hit when you're interacting into with a mouse or cursor or a touchscreen device. And sometimes those are so close to each other, or sometimes you accidentally hit one area if you're intending to hit another, so that violates the rules under Fitts law. Why is that important for older adults? As we grow older, our motor function changes. So we would have some tremors that we're experiencing. It could be because of aging, your motor function deteriorates, but it could also be comorbidity. You might have some, physical, conditions that, those difficulties in motor functions are part of the symptoms of why they're, of why they would fail to like hit the target correctly. So, accuracy when the users are performing the task and having the ability to complete tasks efficiently should be a goal of a good experience. It's not like, we design a website, basta maka-check out, that's good na. Like as if, basta, that's not the thing anymore, right? That's not how we do experience nowadays. That was probably, I don't know, 30 years ago. You don't sell nowadays you sell experience. You make a big difference in the experience of your products that you're making. People, like, for example, you don't buy, when I was younger, when I was probably in college, you would buy SD cards or thumb drives because they're like bigger in size or capacity. Not anymore. That's like a given. You get all the capacity that you need. You get the fast devices that you need whenever you buy technology. Pero when nowadays you buy because of the experience that the products are giving you. I'll probably use an example that's local in Philippines. So if we stick with let's say, if we stick with retail, because that's where I am right now. If you stick with all of the companies that have online presence in the Philippines, and as you've mentioned, right, like if there's parity on, say, the products that they're offering, if you can buy all of the items that you can buy from retailer A, retailer B, and retailer C, but then you realize that your your 60 something year old parents, or your grandparents, or your older aunt who's living near you or next to you is able to, in the pandemic, for example, if they're able to figure out ordering their essential items, their groceries, things that they really need at home, if they're able to figure out that experience and buy it from retailer B, for example, kahit na same same products are being sold by the three, but then they cannot figure out, right? Like they need your help all the time to add to cart or whatever for retailer A and retailer C. For sure, you would end up just wanting to buy from retailer B, right? Because even if you're not present at home, you know that they're not gonna run out of stuff that they need. That they don't need to go out of their home and they remain safe, especially if there's like whatever queue it is right now in Philippines. Um, and you know that they don't have to if my bagyo, for example, they don't need to go out of the house and they can get items delivered. So that's that's a difference with thinking through the experience, but also considering who the user base is. Majority of the users right now might be Gen Zs or millennials, for example. But it doesn't mean that we neglect those on who fall on the older age group. It doesn't mean that they would not need to use our product. It's just a huge miss, right? Like if you really take if you're a company and if you really take pride with a solid customer experience team or product development and design team, why would you choose not to include everybody, right? Isn't that the biggest challenge of product development, is to just, if you're able to solve and make it usable for anybody, any human who is able to use it, why not? Why would you say no to customers? No, other people might argue with me with my answer, but I think if we design products and if we design experiences with the thought of catering to those who are considered the least of our users, those users who have difficulties in using it, it's only going to be a even better experience for those who don't have difficulty in the first place. um, it wouldn't be harder for someone like us to use it if we made it good or better for older adults or people with disabilities. And the other thing for that is, I think it's a good thing for people in companies to also realize that our current generation are not only shopping, or I don't know, or supporting companies because of the products per se. If you think about it, people are supporting companies now because of the values that those company promote. So how do you translate values into actual and tangible stuff, aside from just, like, I don't know, printing it out in some brochure and say that yeah, we're a good company, we think about human beings and we're ethical? This is how you would show it, right? So you show that your company is really doing something about the values, about the vision statement or the mission statement that it has, by showing that we treat everybody in this society equally, that we think of individuals in the society with empathy. We try to understand the different needs of individuals, and individuals are unique, and there's nothing wrong with that. And being empathic and being compassionate to the needs of people is not being, it's not just like being nice or being philanthropic about it. It is actually good business if we think of the needs of people. It depends on the business. So you usually have measures. You have net promoter scores. You have you have web accessibility measures. You have usability testing. You have you just have regular benchmarking that you do with the products or services that you have. And with the analytics, you should be able to detect which age groups are using, how successful are they in using the products or services, how well are you doing in that type of market. So how much of those segments of the population are actually using your brand or using your product. So there are a lot of signals, and it varies across organizations. But I would say that the same measures, the same metrics that you use for other segments would be the same thing that you would use. You just adjust the age group that you're, it's kind of like having your spotlight, right? That you're, if you have your spotlight on this one group, then you just, why don't you pan your spotlight on another group? Those are that's also an indication of like where our blind spots are. Maybe we have a blind spot on a certain group of our population that we haven't even considered before. So maybe if the marketing team was not looking at that before, maybe the marketing strategy was not really built for that segment, and that's one thing to consider. So if we're not doing really, if any company is not doing really good in specific segments, so it has to have a lens of like looking at different aspects on why. So it's not just on the design of the products or the services per se, but how is marketing doing its task? How is the advertising targeting that that portion of the population, among other things. How is also the company's behavior? So if it's if part of the company has some huge component in customer service, how do we serve our customers when when they need to call the company, when they need to like return products, when how accessible is it, right, for this subgroup? So like I said earlier, right, when we talk about end to end, we don't just fix portions of it, but we look at customer experience all the way through. After they purchase the product from us, when they start having problems with the product, when they need to return the product, because if we cater from the stats to the end, then there's a lot of potential for the customers to return and to even bring their friends or family to be your customers as well. Specific to seniors, but also this is just like the basic rules of product design and development, if you may. Right, number one, you don't build a product or a service if you're not serving the need. In that's just, who would buy it if it's not even a solution for an existing need? Number two, right, if it's a need for a certain, for people in general, then you have to understand the people first. So whatever that is, whatever the product or the experiences that you're creating, you don't create it without understanding who they are first. So before it even becomes a problem of like people not understanding it, why is that even happening to begin with? It's because you didn't do your homework, you didn't do your research, and didn't understand what are their pain points, what are the opportunity spaces that you have with your intended users, and then you build it off from there. So there's a lot of things that I can say about trying to do some shortcuts and just start building things for the sake of building it without doing the right research for the target population. You might be able to survive during the first go, but then you're gonna have to go back anyway, and you're like, oops, I didn't ask them that, so I didn't actually do the study on those things. So I don't think it's even like a three golden rules. It's really just like build for a need, your product needs to be a solution for an existing need, or an unmet need, or a gap in the current experiences or world. And when you're building products for people, you need to understand people. You need to get to know people. You need to do your research on how individuals would even use that thing, and what their expectations are to solve that specific problems or issues or needs that they have. That's the only way. And when we're studying people, make sure that we do it with empathy, the genuine empathy, and not just the pretentious ones. And we do it with compassion, And because that's the only way for you to really understand and design a compelling product. So if you do it, I think you said it earlier too, if you do things with authenticity, and when you do it with with a clear intent in mind, then the product should be able to speak for itself. Yeah, I think the most common mistakes is to work on the assumptions that we already know what their experiences are. You cannot assume that you know what they're going through, because that's not us, right? We have assumptions on, I don't know, how does it feel to have, my eyesight is not really good to begin with, but we have assumptions on how we look at things, how we move around, how we navigate into our world, how we use technology when we are at that age. But there's nothing that would be the same as actually getting those feedback from the actual people who belong to that demographics. To In addition to knowing exactly and gathering feedback from the actual demographics that we are concerned with, one thing that we should also remember is part of being compassionate and part of having empathy is also learn the proper terminologies, right? Treat these different groups of individuals as your equals. They might have, that's why it's called different abilities. So they're not disability, but they're different abilities that they're just different from what we can do. It doesn't mean that they're less than us, because what's the definition of normal in the first place anyway? I don't believe in any of those. So make sure that we learn the proper terms. Do not do not use terminologies, or do not come with a perspective that they're gonna perform less than this so and so group, or they're not gonna understand it as well as this other group. That's the worst thing that you can do when you enter a space, when you're trying to understand a certain demographic, whatever that is, right? Even if the current views that, oh, porque millennial or porque Gen Z, they're like this na. So it's not advisable to do that either way, right? In any group. In terms of lessons, I think with my experience, I've started studying older adults and how they deal with technology way back when I was doing grad school. And I think the best lessons that I have is to that I realized that they're actually way more excited and way more concerned about technology and how research is conducted, more than other people that I've ever met. So when we were recruiting them as participants in vehicle assisting systems, back in grad school, I was doing driving simulators, and we're looking at low level vision, visual psychophysics type of work. And when we're doing those studies, it's actually older adults who are excited with the new innovation that can be done. So we're looking at that with the perspective of neural plasticity, right? The idea that yes, our neurons, our brain, our nervous system might deteriorate as we age, but it doesn't mean that it's permanent. That we can retrain our brains, and it can create new neural connections, so we're able to function at an optimal level even as we age. So imagine these types of very scientific experiments, but the participants that we worked with around that time, they're aware of the scientific studies. They know the benefits of this, and their participation would benefit science in general and the future of the society. So I think that's one of the things that we fail to consider, right? If we don't consider them as members of the society, these are contributing members of the world. And it is a shame if they're not even considered as part of customers or users of the innovation and the products that we're trying to create. older
Okay.
adults whom we recruited to be part of the research that we are doing. So they would have some basic background on what research we're trying to do. And they're actually way more engaged than other groups of participants I've ever had. Like, they would be the ones who want you to get in touch with them on what happened to your research. So they'd be excited. They would always check on you. It's like, oh, are you a doctor now? But they're very they're just very concerned with what would be the end product of this research that you're conducting.
Wave beats music.
What we were working on before would be, driving assisting systems. So these are visual psychophysics studies that would allow car manufacturers to improve the technologies that are within cars. And we were building training materials for driving simulators that would help older adults to keep their ability to drive, being able to see the low level vision stimuli that they would be seeing on the road. So these types of research, when if and when found to be effective, it'll actually allow older adults to stay on the road and drive for themselves. It might not be a case as well as important in Philippines as compared to the States, because people there, I think the ones who have cars have drivers anyway. But in the States, it's a big deal for older adults to maintain their independence, ability to drive themselves from one point to another. And when they lose, because they lose their driver's license if they are not able to pass the test that for them to keep it. So when they lose their driver's license, then it means that they would be very dependent and very reliant to outside forces or outside factors or
Wave
people.
beats music.
So imagine not being able to like do the things that you used to be doing independently on your own anymore. But then here comes science, and here comes technology that would allow you to maintain that level of independence. So what I was talking about earlier was about driving technologies. But also, Nika, you can also think about that and apply that in other products, other services, and other forms of technology that we are designing out there. Because to be honest, even to all the apps that you have, your mobile phone, all the technology that we have in the world, these are things that allow us to navigate our current world and live our lives efficiently, right? It helps us maintain our social lives. It helps us do our chores efficiently. So imagine making all of these usable and delightful to use, even by older adults. That's actually opening the doors for them and allowing them to still have that level of independence and the joy of doing things on their own, even in their older age. And one of the things that I think I cannot stress it enough, right? That when we're trying to promote, when I'm trying to advocate for the needs of older adults, I think one of the things that people sometimes fail to realize is that advocating for older adults now
Wave beats
and
music.
making sure that those products, experiences, and services, what have you, are usable for the older adults of today. One thing that we should realize is it actually prepares those technologies to be usable for us when we reach that age as well. So I cannot stress that enough. I don't think everybody who's looking at customer experience, product experience, I don't think everybody, there's a lot who have already realized that, but I don't think everybody has appreciated that point well enough. That if you're preparing the experience for older adults, and let's include the people with disabilities or different abilities. If we have, if we make these experiences usable for everybody, we're not really um, we're not uh, we're not forgetting anybody. It's only gonna make it better for everybody, and it's preparing our product, services, and our society as a whole to be more friendly or more usable for everybody down the road. I think about voice as a form of modality, as one of the modalities for individuals or people to experience stuff. So as of the moment, it just so happened that a lot of the experiences that we have in the digital world have been through vision, through our ability to read and touch things. But when voice comes in, ability to speak through and hear a response with the system, with the experience that we're interacting with, is just a different modality of us engaging with a product or a service or an experience. So, with that being said, right, one of the benefits for having voice interaction is just giving people a choice. If a user, or be it older adult, or people with disability, or just a regular person like ourselves who can use a regular website or an app efficiently to begin with, but just having a different way of interacting with that experience would be a good thing. But in some cases, having voice as an option would probably provide an even better or a more efficient experience for some people. So, like I mentioned earlier, that well, I have to give with a caveat that you know uh, given that the voice would be able to recognize the accent and the language of the users too, right? So, for example, one of the examples that I mentioned earlier would be if an older adult or a person with disability would have a hard time using, the more traditional ways of interacting user interface. It would be, if the device is too small, or if the targets were designed inefficiently, then those problems can be eliminated if they can only interact with the system by speaking through the system. But again, with new modality or new options coming into play, it also introduces potential challenges. So as right now, the more obvious is how accurate is it when it's recognizing speech. How accurate is it when it's recognizing the different things like accent, the voice, the volume, the language that individuals are using. Now, that's a different discussion. But on the surface, having those options for interactions could just do the world good. There's I don't see any harm, but it's just an exciting thing to think through, just a different dimension, if you may, of experiencing products and services or what have you, that we're offering out there. It was when was it? I think 8 years ago. I actually led the research for developing products, um, heating, ventilation, and cooling. So thermostat products that would control temperature within a space or a structure that uses a voice device. So in that case, what we were looking at were use cases wherein, if a person is not able to like control the devices by walking through the device, or by if there are some cases wherein like you really just need to have it controlled by just like shouting at the device, how would that interaction be? So in that sense, it's not that voice replaced the more traditional interaction for the UI, but it gave an additional way of interacting with the product. There's this is just me hypothesizing, okay? And I think um, especially if the voice interaction would be would be able to be more of a like more natural language type of interaction, and less less rigid set of commands, for it to be able to recognize what the older adults are saying or are commanding to it or trying to interact with it, then it would only allow older adults to just be able to interact with the product and do their tasks more efficiently without having without having that steep learning curve of knowing where to click, trying to remember where to go, or trying to remember how how they save stuff on when they're looking at their password. One of the examples that you mentioned, if securing their password is one of the problems, but if they're able to interact with products in my at our company right now, you can if the household has voice control devices around it, they can actually already just purchase items. You can tell your voice control devices to buy this product for you, and it'll ask you options on you want it delivered or when do you want it, and you can just pay through the voice interaction as well. So if that is the case, and if it's something that older adults will be comfortable with, then it has a potential for a good and more efficient interactions with them. But like I mentioned, right, it would this is where you would have to contend with level of comfort, level of trust in automation. How do we deal with privacy? So those are potentially variables or factors that some groups of the population would be a little bit more concerned than the others.